and Deputy Director Bongino. The FBI, after all, has a long, troubling history of targeting black communities, of constant surveillance, of treating us like criminals just for existing. Representative Maxine Waters then leaned forward in her chair, her finger jabbing toward the man seated across from her on the CBS soundstage. The studio lights gleamed off her perfectly styled hair as she delivered what she clearly believed was a devastating opening salvo. She brought up COINTELPRO, Fred Hampton, the constant surveillance of civil rights leaders, the infiltration of black churches, and now you, a former cop, a former agent. You want to sit here and lecture me about ethics, about integrity? The live studio audience, packed with progressive activists who'd lined up hours early for tickets, erupted in applause. Waters smiled, feeding off the energy. I've been fighting for my community for 35 years. I was in the streets during the LA riots, the LA rebellion, when this city was on fire because of police brutality. I've been there, so don't you sit there with your badge and your files and think you can intimidate me. She pointed directly at the camera. The FBI needs to be investigated. Not my people, not my community. You need to answer to us. More applause. Margaret Brennan, the moderator, tried to interject. Congresswoman, Deputy Director Bongino, will have a chance to respond, but Waters wasn't finished. And I'll tell you something else. I'm tired of this administration using law enforcement to attack progressive voices, to attack women of color who speak truth to power. That's what this is really about. That's what it's always been about. She sat back, arms crossed, chin up. The look on her face screamed, "Top that." Deputy FBI Director Dan Bongino hadn't moved during the entire tirade. He sat with a yellow folder closed in front of him, his expression completely neutral. When the applause finally died down, he leaned toward his microphone. His voice carried the unmistakable accent of Queens, New York, a working-class, direct, no-nonsense tone. Congresswoman Waters, thank you for that performance. Waters' eyes narrowed. But since you brought up ethics, since you want to talk about who should be investigated, since you want to question the integrity of the FBI, I think it's only fair we talk about your ethics, your integrity, your record. He opened the folder, revealing documents, spreadsheets, and photographs. Let's talk about the bank you helped while your husband was making money off it. Let's talk about the $1 million you've paid your daughter from campaign funds. Let's talk about your mansion that's not even in your district. Let's talk about your family business. Waters shot forward in her seat. That is a lie. It's not a lie, Congresswoman. Bongino's voice remained calm, but there was a distinct steeliness underneath. Every single thing I'm about to ask you about is public record. House Ethics Committee reports, Federal Election Commission filings, your own financial disclosures. Not conspiracy theories, not right-wing attacks. Your own documents. He pulled out the first page. So, let's start at the beginning. Let's talk about One United Bank. The color drained from Waters' face. Margaret Brennan leaned forward. Deputy Director, I think we should not— No! Waters' voice was sharp. No! Let him ask his questions. Let him show everyone what this is really about. Bongino smiled slightly. Oh, I'm happy to show everyone what this is about. This is about a member of Congress who's been enriching herself and her family for decades, all while representing one of the poorest districts in California. He looked directly at Waters. September 2008. The financial crisis is in full swing. Banks are collapsing. Lehman Brothers just went under. The Treasury Department is scrambling to figure out who gets TARP money, bailout money, and who doesn't. Bongino pulled out a document. On September 9, 2008, you called Treasury Secretary Hank Paulson. Do you remember that call? Waters shifted in her seat. I made many calls during the financial crisis. This specific call, you requested a meeting for minority-owned banks. Is that correct? I was advocating for minority-owned institutions that were being overlooked. And who attended this meeting? Silence. Let me help you. The meeting was held on September 9th. In attendance, Treasury officials, Federal Reserve officials, and executives from One United Bank. Is that correct? Multiple banks were represented, but One United was there. Yes or no? Yes. Good. Now, let's talk about One United Bank. Bongino pulled out another document. One United is a minority-owned bank, one of the largest black-owned banks in the country, headquartered in Boston. Do I have that right? Yes. And who was on One United's board of directors in September 2008? Waters' jaw clenched. I don't recall the entire board. Your husband, Sidney Williams, he was on the board. That's right. The studio had fallen completely silent. My husband was indeed on the board. Yes. And how much stock did he actually own in One United? Waters glanced at her lawyer, who was sitting just off camera, and he shook his head slightly. I'd have to check my disclosure forms. I checked them for you, Bongino said, holding up another document. According to your 2008 financial disclosure, your husband held stock valued between $250,000 and $500,000 in One United Bank. That's a significant investment, wouldn't you say? Waters began, My husband's investments are separate from my... But they're not, are they? Bongino leaned forward. Because when you called the Treasury Secretary, when you arranged that meeting, One United Bank was facing serious financial trouble. They'd lost millions in Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac. They needed TARP money. And you, a senior member of Congress, a member of the Financial Services Committee, you set up a meeting for them with the Treasury Department. Waters' voice rose. I was helping all minority banks. Then why did One United's CEO specifically request the meeting through you? Why did you personally call Secretary Paulson if this was about all minority banks? Why were you the one making the call for this specific bank where your husband had $250,000 invested? That's not... And here's what happened next. Bongino pulled out even more documents. On December 19, 2008, One United Bank received $12 million in TARP funds. $12 million in taxpayer bailout money. Did that help your husband's stock value? Waters stood up. I am not going to sit here and be accused. Sit down, Congresswoman, Bongino commanded. Bongino's voice cut like a knife. You wanted to talk about FBI integrity. You wanted to question my ethics. You don't get to walk away when I ask about yours. Margaret Brennan intervened, saying, Deputy Director, perhaps we should... No. Waters sat back down, her face flushed with anger. No, let him continue. Let him show everyone his witch hunt. This isn't a witch hunt, Bongino countered, spreading the documents across the table where the cameras could see them. This is a House Ethics Committee investigation that lasted 3.5 years. 3.5 years, Congresswoman. Do you know what they found? He then read from the report. The Office of Congressional Ethics concluded that you arranged the Treasury meeting specifically to benefit One United Bank, that you failed to disclose your husband's financial interest, that you used your position to help a bank where your family had hundreds of thousands of dollars invested. Do you dispute these findings? The committee eventually cleared me. On a technicality, Bongino's voice rose for the first time. They said you thought you were helping all minority banks, even though you specifically arranged the meeting for One United. They said your chief of staff should have stopped you, so they gave him a letter of reproval instead. He set the report down. But here's what actually happened. Your husband had $350,000 in a failing bank. You arranged a meeting. That bank got $12 million in taxpayer money. Your husband's investment was protected, and you got off because Democrats on the Ethics Committee decided to believe your excuse. Bongino leaned back. So, let me ask you this, Congresswoman. If a Republican member of Congress, let's say a Tea Party Republican, if he had arranged a meeting for a bank where his wife had $350,000 invested, and that bank got $12 million in bailout money, would you call that corruption? Waters' mouth opened, then closed, then opened again. That's different. How? Explain to me how it's different. Use specific details. Tell me the difference between you helping a bank where your husband is a board member and has massive stock holdings versus a hypothetical Republican doing the exact same thing. The studio was absolutely silent. The context of the financial crisis. The context is that you used your position to help your family financially. That's called corruption, Congresswoman. And the only reason you're not in jail is because your Democratic colleagues on the Ethics Committee gave you a pass. Waters was now shaking with pure rage. You are twisting this. I'm reading directly from the Ethics Committee report, Congresswoman. Your party's own investigation, your colleagues' findings. Bongino closed that folder, then opened another one. But let's move on. Let's talk about your daughter. If Waters looked angry before, she now looked terrified. Now, what does my daughter have to do with everything? Bongino pulled out a stack of Federal Election Commission filings. Karen Waters, your daughter. Let's talk about how much money you've paid her from your campaign. He then activated a screen behind him. Numbers immediately appeared, large, glaring numbers. Since 2003, you have paid your daughter $1.2 million from your campaign fund, Citizens for Waters. That's $1.2 million. The audience audibly gasped. That's for legitimate campaign work, Waters asserted. Is it? Bongino pulled up even more detailed records. So, let's really break this down. In 2022 alone, you paid Karen $120,300. Then in 2021, it was another $81,650. And in 2020, $226,000 or $600. Year after year, we're talking hundreds of thousands of dollars flowing from your campaign straight to your daughter. He then turned to face Waters head-on. What exactly does she do for all this money? She manages my slate mailer operation. Slate mailers. Could you explain what that is to our audience? What exactly is a slate mailer? Waters paused. It's a voter guide that includes my endorsements. Allow me to explain it a bit more clearly. Bongino then brought up an image of one of Waters's very own slate mailers. A slate mailer is essentially just a sample ballot. It shows voters exactly which candidates Maxine Waters is endorsing. Now, here's where it gets really clever. Candidates actually have to pay her campaign if they want to appear on this mailer. He allowed that information to sink in for a moment. So, if you're vying for a city council seat in Los Angeles and you want Maxine Waters' endorsement, you don't simply receive it, you pay for it. Your campaign then writes a check to Citizens for Waters, and that money feeds directly into the fund that compensates Karen Waters for managing those mailers. Waters attempted to interject. That's precisely how it works. And do you know who has paid you for these endorsements? Let's take a look at the list. Names then flashed onto the screen. Kamala Harris, during her run for Attorney General, paid $33,000. Gavin Newsom for governor, 27,000. George Gascon, the LA district attorney, 36,500. Every single one of them paid your campaign tens of thousands of dollars just to get on your mailer. Bongino offered a humorless smile. And where does all that money end up? With your daughter? For slate mailer management fees? For administrative services? For rally expenses? Over $1 million, Congresswoman. He then pulled up even more FEC records. And here's what makes this whole situation truly unique. You are the only federal politician in America who operates a slate mailer system from your campaign committee. The absolute only one. While it's common in California state politics, and that's a completely different topic, at the federal level, you're the anomaly. You stand alone. Sure, other members of Congress might pay family members, but name one who's paid their child over $1 million. Silence. Just name one, Congresswoman. Just one other member of Congress who has funneled $1.2 million to their daughter over 2 decades. Waters remained silent. You can't, can you? Because there simply isn't one. This is your family business, essentially your method for transforming campaign donations into family income. Bongino leaned in closer. And let me tell you what truly bothers me about this whole situation. You represent one of the absolute poorest districts in California. The median household income in your district is only $54,000 a year. People there are struggling just to pay rent, buy groceries, and keep their lights on. Yet you're paying your daughter almost $200,000 a year from those very same campaign funds. He then produced a Los Angeles Times article from 2004. Do you recall what you told the LA Times when they questioned your family profiting from your position back in 2004, after they reported your family had earned over $1 million through your connections? Waters averted her gaze. Bongino quoted from the article saying, "They do their business and I do mine. We are not bad people." That was your exact quote. We are not bad people. He then placed the article back down. Do you know who else said basically the very same thing? Hunter Biden. I'm not a bad person. That's the go-to defense for every corrupt politician caught enriching their family. We're not bad people. Bongino's voice grew stern. But you see, Congresswoman, good people don't funnel $1.2 million of campaign funds to their daughters. Good people don't create elaborate schemes where candidates are forced to pay for their endorsements. Good people certainly don't treat their campaign committee like a personal family ATM. Waters stood up again, abruptly. This is a character assassination. This is your FEC filing right here. Bongino held up the document for all to see. These are your exact numbers, your payments, and your daughter's income from your campaign. Margaret Brennan attempted to regain control of the discussion. I think we need to move to... We're not done yet. Bongino opened yet another folder, stating, because we need to talk about where you live. A photograph then appeared on the screen behind him. It was a beautiful mansion nestled in an upscale Los Angeles neighborhood. This is your home, in the Hancock Park area. Quite a beautiful place. How much did you pay for it exactly? Waters slowly sat back down. That's my personal property. You disclosed it, though. It's public record. You acquired this property back in 2004. Its current value is estimated to be between $2.8 and $4 million, depending on the appraisal. Would you say that's an accurate assessment? Well, the real estate market does fluctuate. Let's conservatively estimate it at $3 million. So, you own a $3 million mansion. Do you actually live in your congressional district? Waters' jaw tightened. When I purchased that house, it was within my district, but it isn't anymore. Redistricting altered the boundaries. Your house is now outside CA 43, he stated. So, when that happened, did you move back into your district? He pressed. Silence. Did you move back into the district you represent? Yes or no? He demanded. The redistricting, she stammered. That's a no, he concluded. You chose to stay in your mansion rather than live with your constituents. Bongino then pulled up some statistics. Let's talk about those constituents, he urged. CA 43, your district, he clarified. Median household income, $54,000. Poverty rate over 20%, he continued. It's one of the poorest districts in California, he emphasized. South Central LA, Englewood, parts of Gardena. He looked pointedly at Waters. Your constituents are struggling, and you're living in a $3 million mansion outside their district. My husband and I worked hard for, she began, but he cut her off. Oh, let's talk about your other properties. Bongino pulled up more records. You also own a 10-acre ranch in the Santa Monica Mountains. Estimated value, $2 million. You own a vacation home in Palm Springs. Value, $500,000. You own apartment buildings in Oakland. Value approximately $1 million. He recited. He looked up. That's $7 million in real estate. Plus, you've got $390 in a Bank of America checking account, $1.5 million in a Wells Fargo retirement account, a stock portfolio worth $1.2 million. Bongino stood up and walked toward Waters' side of the stage. Your net worth is somewhere between $6 million and $10 million, depending on whose estimate you believe. You make $174,000 a year from Congress. You've been in office for 35 years. Do the math, Congresswoman, he challenged. Even with your husband's income, and we'll get to his business dealings, even with both your incomes, how does a public servant accumulate $10 million? Waters tried to recover. My husband is a successful businessman. Your husband is a former NFL player who became a Mercedes dealer, Bongino countered. That's nice, but let's not pretend you're the Kennedys, he scoffed. You're not old money. You're a public servant from a working-class background who somehow ended up with $10 million and multiple mansions. He walked back to his seat. And you know what makes this really rich? You call yourself a poverty warrior. You lecture about inequality. You demand higher taxes on the wealthy, but you live in luxury while your constituents live in poverty. Bongino pulled up a campaign ad Waters had run. This is from your 2022 campaign. You're standing in South Central LA talking about fighting for working families, about economic justice, about making sure the rich pay their fair share, he described. He paused the video on Waters' face. And then you went home to your $3 million mansion in Hancock Park, outside your district. How many of your constituents can afford a house in Hancock Park, Congresswoman? He asked. This is demagoguery. This is facts. You represent poor people. You don't live with poor people. You represent people struggling with rent. You own $7 million in real estate. You lecture about inequality while living a life of luxury. Bongino sat down and opened yet another folder. But we're not done yet, he warned. Let's talk about April 2021. Brooklyn Center, Minnesota. Waters went pale. You remember Brooklyn Center? Daunte Wright shooting protests outside the police station. I was supporting peaceful protesters, she insisted. Were you? Bongino activated a video on the screen. It was Waters standing outside the Brooklyn Center police station, surrounded by protesters. Her voice boomed from the speakers. We're looking for a guilty verdict. And we're looking to see if all of the talk that took place and has been taking place after they saw what happened to George Floyd, if nothing does not happen, then we know that we've got to not only stay in the street, but we've got to fight for justice. The video continued. A reporter asked, "What happens if we do not get what you just told? What should the people do? What should protesters do?" Waters' response, "We've got to stay on the street, and we've got to get more active, more confrontational. We've got to make sure that they know that we mean business," she declared. Bongino stopped the video. "Get more confrontational?" he echoed. "Those were your words during the Derek Chauvin trial. While a jury was deliberating, you told protesters to get more confrontational." He pulled out another document. "Do you know what Judge Peter Cahill said about your comments?" "The judge presiding over the Chauvin trial," he clarified. "Let me read it. I wish elected officials would stop talking about this case, especially in a manner that is disrespectful to the rule of law and to the judicial branch," he quoted. He said, "Your comments could be grounds for a mistrial." Bongino looked directly at Waters. "You nearly caused the biggest police brutality trial in decades to be thrown out because you couldn't keep your mouth shut, because you had to grandstand for the cameras." Waters tried to defend herself. "I was expressing support for—" But Bongino cut in. "You were inciting violence, get more confrontational, while a city was already on edge. While businesses were boarded up and the National Guard was deployed, you actually told protesters to escalate." He leaned forward. "Let me ask you something. When a police officer says something inflammatory, when a cop makes a controversial statement, you demand they be fired. You call for investigations. You want accountability. But when you incite confrontation, when you inflame tensions during a trial, that's just supporting protesters. That's protected speech. And cops have First Amendment rights too. But you don't care about that, do you? The rules only apply to other people, not to you." Bongino gathered those documents and opened the final folder. "Let's talk about your legislative record. You've been in Congress for 35 years. You're chair of the House Financial Services Committee. That's a powerful position. You oversee bank securities, insurance, housing. It's one of the most important committees in Congress." He pulled out a list. "So tell me, what major legislation have you passed as chair?" Waters straightened. "I've worked on numerous bills." "Name one. Name one major piece of financial reform legislation that passed because of your leadership." Silence. "Dodd-Frank was before you were chair. The CARES Act wasn't your bill. The infrastructure bill wasn't your committee. So what have you accomplished?" More silence. "I'll tell you what you're famous for. Reclaiming my time." Remember that Bongino played a clip of Waters in a committee hearing repeatedly saying, "Reclaiming my time," to shut down Treasury Secretary Steve Mnuchin. That went viral. Millions of views, T-shirts, memes, anti-Maxine, reclaiming her time. Great TV. But it's not legislation. It's not reform. It's theater. He pulled up more clips. Here's you calling for Trump's impeachment dozens of times. Impeach 45. You sold merchandise. Your daughter's company handled the sales. More money for the family. You fundraised millions off anti-Trump rhetoric. Bongino looked at Waters. "You're great at going viral. You're great at sound bites. You're great at outrage. But what have you actually done for your constituents?" "I have fought for my community for decades." "Have you? Your district is still poor, still struggling, still has some of the worst schools in California, still has high crime. After 35 years of you in office, what's improved?" He closed the folder. "I'll tell you what you've done. You've enriched yourself. You've enriched your family. You've built a real estate empire. You've accumulated millions of dollars. You've become a celebrity. But your constituents, they're still poor." Waters shot to her feet. You don't know anything about my district. I know your median household income is $54,000 and yours is $3 million as a year. I know they're struggling to survive and you're buying vacation homes. I know they live in your district, and you don't. Bongino stood up, too. You came on this show to attack the FBI, to question our ethics, to claim we target black communities. But let's review your record. He started ticking off fingers. 1. You helped a bank where your husband had $350,000 invested get $12 million in taxpayer bailout money. 2. You've paid your daughter $1.2 million from campaign funds for a scheme where candidates buy your endorsement. 3. You live in a $3 million mansion outside the district you claim to represent. 4. You told protesters to get more confrontational during a trial. 5. In 35 years, you've passed virtually no significant legislation. 6. Your family has profited millions from your position. He looked directly at Waters. So when you sit there and question my integrity, when you attack the FBI's ethics, when you claim we're corrupt, I have one question for you. He paused. Where do you get the nerve? Waters' face was a mask of rage. This is a racist attack. Don't! Bongino's voice cut like a whip. Don't you dare play that card with me. The room went completely silent. I grew up in Queens. My dad was a city worker. My mom worked in a department store. I became a cop because I wanted to help people. I worked the midnight shift in the South Bronx, one of the most dangerous precincts in America. I protected people. I served people. I put my life on the line. His voice rose. I joined the Secret Service. I protected presidents. Democrat presidents. Republican presidents. I didn't care about their politics. I took a bullet if necessary. That was my job. He pointed at Waters. So don't you sit there in your $3 million mansion after funneling millions to your family after 35 years of enriching yourself off the people you claim to represent. Don't you dare call me racist for asking about your corruption. Waters tried to speak. Bongino talked over her. This isn't about race. This is about corruption. This is about a politician who's been gaming the system for decades. Someone who's been using her position to enrich her family, living in luxury while her constituents struggle in poverty and lecturing about inequality while raking in millions. He walked straight up to her. You want to investigate the FBI? All right, go ahead and investigate us. We've got nothing to hide. But you, Congresswoman, should be investigated too. Things like your bank deals, your daughter's million-dollar paychecks, your mansion, your family's business arrangements, and all that campaign spending. Bongino's voice dropped, becoming even more dangerous. The big difference between you and me? I actually have evidence of your corruption. Things like ethics committee reports, FEC filings, tax records, and public documents. All I have to do is read them. It's all there. He gathered all his folders. But what do you have on the FBI? Accusations? Insinuations? Conspiracy theories about targeting black communities? But no real evidence, no proof, just inflammatory rhetoric designed to deflect from your own scandals. He set the folders down with a noticeable thump. So here's my challenge to you, Congresswoman. You really want to investigate the FBI? Then bring it on. Subpoena us. Call hearings. Ask all your questions. We'll answer every single one of them. We'll show you our files, our procedures, and all our oversight mechanisms. He leaned forward intently. But you also have to answer questions about One United Bank, about Karen Waters, about your real estate, and about your family's business. Can you do that? Can you answer those questions as honestly as you expect the FBI to answer yours? Waters' mouth opened, but no sound came out. I didn't think so, he thought. Bongino sat back down and folded his arms. I'm done here. Margaret Brennan finally managed to speak. We're going to take a commercial break, but the damage was already done. The video clip of Dan Bongino saying, "Don't you dare play that card with me," instantly went viral. Within 4 hours, it racked up 50 million views on what used to be Twitter. By the end of that day, it had been viewed an astonishing 127 million times across all platforms. The full confrontation, all 22 minutes of it, was downloaded, clipped, analyzed, and shared millions of times. Conservative media outlets absolutely ran with it for days. But even liberal outlets had to acknowledge what had just happened. CNN's panel discussion the very next morning was quite telling. "Look, I'm progressive," one commentator stated. "I support Maxine Waters on most issues, but she just got absolutely destroyed last night. There's really no other way to put it. She came in hot, tried to put Bongino on the defensive, and he simply demolished her. One United Bank, her daughter's payments, the mansion, these are all real issues that she couldn't answer." "The don't you dare moment was incredible," another panelist added, "especially when she tried to play the race card and he just shut it down completely. That was genuinely powerful. And the thing is, he had receipts for everything he said. Ethics Committee reports, FEC filings, her own financial disclosures, it was all there. This wasn't mere speculation. This was concrete documentation." The Washington Post even ran a fact check. Bongino's claims about Waters? Mostly accurate. The New York Times editorial board wrote about Representative Waters' accountability problem. Even MSNBC, usually friendly territory for Waters, ran segments questioning her responses. Joy Reid tried to defend her, but even she had to acknowledge the optics were truly bad. Really, really bad. Within just 48 hours, 3 significant things happened. First, the House Ethics Committee announced it was reopening its investigation into Waters' role in the One United Bank matter. The committee chair, a moderate Democrat, released a statement. New questions have been raised that deserve a thorough examination. Second, the Federal Election Commission announced a comprehensive audit of Citizens for Waters, specifically focusing on payments to Karen Waters and the Slate mailer operation. An FEC spokesperson said they were examining whether those payments constituted excessive compensation that could potentially violate campaign finance law. Third, and perhaps most significantly, a primary challenger suddenly emerged. Sidney Kamlager was 48 years old, a former member of the California State Assembly, and a rising star in California Democratic politics. She was a black progressive on policy, but known for her competence and getting things done, rather than just viral moments and sound bites. Her announcement video actually opened with footage of that very Bongino-Waters confrontation. "This is what happens when performance replaces service," Kamlager said, speaking directly to the camera. She continued, "When celebrity replaces competence, and when a politician spends more time on TV than they do in their district." Then the video cut to Kamlager herself, walking through South Central LA. "I grew up right here. I know these streets. I know these struggles. And I know that after 35 years of Maxine Waters in Congress, fundamentally, nothing has changed. We're still poor. Our schools are still failing. Our streets are still unsafe. Our families are still struggling." She then stopped at a local community center. "It's time for fresh leadership, not just a different ideology. I'm progressive. I believe in economic justice, civil rights, and holding power accountable. but I also believe in getting results, in legislation that actually passes, in policies that genuinely help people, and in representatives who truly live in their districts. Then the tagline appeared, Sydney Kamlager for Congress, Service over Celebrity. The video, on its own, went completely viral. It racked up 8 million views in just the first 24 hours. Progressive groups immediately found themselves divided. Justice Democrats, who used to support Waters, decided to stay neutral. The Working Families Party endorsed Kamlager within a week. Even major unions started calling both sides, trying to figure out who to throw their support behind. Waters' fundraising then plummeted. In the quarter before the debate, she had raised $890,000. In the quarter immediately following, she only brought in $240,000, and a huge $150,000 of that came from a single donor, an LA real estate developer who had previously benefited from her committee work. Just 2 weeks after that debate, Waters called a press conference. She came out absolutely swinging. She declared, "I have been targeted by the FBI, by right-wing media, and by those who want to silence a strong black woman who speaks truth to power." She then began to read from her prepared remarks. "The attacks on me are attacks on all of us, on every woman of color in politics, and on every progressive voice that dares to challenge the status quo. They want to destroy me because I'm effective, because I'm feared, and because I cannot be controlled." She looked up from her notes. Dan Bongino is a Trump loyalist, a right-wing extremist. He used FBI resources to conduct political opposition research. He ambushed me on national television with cherry-picked documents and misleading allegations. This was not a debate. This was a hit job. A reporter then raised her hand. "Congresswoman, regarding the One United Bank situation, the House Ethics Committee actually investigated for 3 years. Can you explain?" "I was cleared." Waters snapped. "The committee cleared me. This is old news being dredged up by my political enemies." "But your chief of staff received a letter of reproval," another reporter pressed. "My chief of staff made an error in judgment. I had no knowledge of my husband's investment at the time I requested the meeting. I was working to help all minority-owned banks during the financial crisis." The ethics investigation confirmed that. Another reporter asked, "What about the payments to your daughter?" "That's $1.2 million over 20 years. Aaron Waters runs a legitimate business operation. The slate mailers are legal, properly reported, and they provide a valuable service to voters. The FEC approved this operation back in 2004. Other members of Congress pay family members for legitimate campaign work." "But Bongino said you're the only federal politician running a slate mailer," a reporter interjected. "I don't care what Dan Bongino said." Waters' voice rose, filled with indignation. "He's a liar. He's a right-wing attack dog, and I will not dignify his smears with any further response." She gathered her papers. "This press conference is over." As she walked away, reporters shouted questions at her. She ignored them all. The press conference, however, only made things worse. CNN's Chiron read, "Waters defiant, provides few answers." Fox News ran with "Waters meltdown, refuses to address corruption allegations." 3 months after the debate, Kamlager was leading in the polls by 8 points. Waters' approval rating in her district had plummeted to 41%, the lowest of her entire career. Internal Democratic polling looked even worse. Among voters under 40, Kamlager led by 23 points. Among college-educated voters, she led by 15. Waters only managed to maintain leads among voters over 65 and those with less than a high school education. One focus group comment really summed up the situation. I voted for Maxine my whole life. But the Bongino thing, it made me look at stuff I hadn't paid attention to. The mansion, her daughter getting $1 million, living outside the district. I can't defend that anymore. At a Los Angeles town hall that December, Waters came face to face with her constituents. The room was packed, half supporters, half people eager for answers. An older black man stood up. "Congresswoman, I've known you for 30 years. I've supported you, donated to you, and voted for you every single time. But I've got to ask, did you help that bank because your husband had money in it?" Waters tried to give her standard response. "I was cleared by, 'That's not what I asked.'" The man's voice was firm. "I asked if you helped that bank because your husband had money in it. Yes or no?" The room fell silent. I believed I was helping minority-owned institutions during a crisis, while your husband benefited." The man then sat back down. "That's all I needed to hear," he said quietly. A young woman stood up next. "Why don't you live in the district anymore?" "Redistricting moved the boundaries," Waters replied. "So, move back," the young woman shot back. "If you're going to represent us, then live like us. My rent, for example, is $1,800 a month for just a one-bedroom. But you own a multi-million-dollar mansion. How can you even begin to understand our struggles if you're not living them yourselves?" More and more people started standing up. More questions poured out. Why is your daughter making $200,000 a year from your campaign? What meaningful legislation have you actually passed that's helped any of us? And why did you tell those protesters to get more confrontational during a trial? Why did it take an FBI agent to even ask you these things? Where was our local media? Why weren't we asking? Waters tried her best to get things back in order, but the meeting just dissolved into a chaotic mix of shouting and pure frustration. She ended up leaving early, slipping out through a side exit, with security right by her side. Outside, protesters held up signs that read, "Poverty Pimp" and "Impeach Waters." She was caught red-handed. A teenager captured the whole thing on his phone. The caption read, "Even her own people done with her." That video blew up, racking up 14 million views. Then came March 5th, Super Tuesday in California, and the results started rolling in fast. By 9 p.m., with only 30% of precincts reporting, it was clear. The race was already over. Sidney Camel Logger had 58%. Maxine Waters, 36%. Other candidates had 6%. Cam Leager won by a whopping 22 points. She swept every demographic, except for voters over 70. She took every single neighborhood in the district. She won South Central, Englewood, Gardena. She even won the very neighborhood where Waters used to live before she moved to Hancock Park. Waters's concession speech was short, and frankly, it was bitter. "Tonight," she announced, "dark money and right-wing attacks prevailed." She continued, "Corporate interests who fear a strong black woman's voice succeeded in silencing that voice, but the movement continues. The fight continues, and those who believe in justice will carry on." She didn't offer a single congratulation to Cam Leager. There was no thank you for her staff or her supporters. She just walked right off the stage. Cam Leager's victory speech, though, was everything Waters's concession wasn't. "Tonight is not about me," she started. "Tonight is about all of you. About every family out there struggling to make rent, every student stuck in an underfunded school, every worker just trying to get ahead, every single person who's ever been told to just be satisfied with scraps." She paused for a moment. Maxine Waters served this district for 35 years, and I want to acknowledge her early work, her activism during the LA uprising, her advocacy for communities that were ignored. She broke barriers. She opened doors. The crowd murmured, clearly impressed by her graciousness. But somewhere along the way, she continued, service turned into celebrity. Representation turned into enrichment. Fighting for the people became fighting for herself and her family. The crowd absolutely erupted in applause. "I promise you this," she declared. "I will live right here in this district. I will hold monthly town halls. I will pass real legislation. Legislation that actually helps real people. I will be accessible, accountable, and completely focused on results, not on retweets." More applause followed, and she added, "And I promise that my daughter," she smiled, "if I have one someday, will certainly not be on my campaign payroll for $1 million. The crowd roared with laughter and cheers. "Service is a privilege," she proclaimed, "not a profit center. And it's high time we remembered that." 2 months later, Dan Bongino popped up on his podcast, a wildly popular show reaching millions of listeners. "So, people keep asking me about the Maxine Waters thing," he began, leaning back comfortably in his chair. "Do I feel bad? Do I think I went too far? Do I regret it?" He paused dramatically. "No, hell no. And here's why." Then he leaned forward, intensifying his gaze. "That woman spent 35 years, yes, 35 years, enriching herself and her family off the very people she claimed to represent. She even helped a bank where her husband had 1/3 of $1 million invested, while that bank was on the verge of collapse. She funneled over $1 million in campaign funds to her own daughter. She lived in a mansion completely outside her district, all while her constituents were struggling in poverty." Bongino shook his head slowly. "And nobody called her out. Nobody asked the tough questions. The media just gave her a free pass because she was anti-Trump, because she could deliver those great sound bites, because she attacked Trump. Her own constituents didn't even know half of what she'd done because nobody bothered to investigate." He then pulled out the folders from the debate. He'd actually kept them. "Everything I asked her about was right there in the public record," he stated. "Ethics Committee reports, FEC filings, financial disclosures. I didn't conduct some secret FBI investigation. I simply read publicly available documents that literally no one else bothered to read." He carefully set the folders back down. "That's the real problem with politics today," he mused. "We have politicians who are celebrities first and public servants second. They're fantastic on Twitter, but absolutely terrible when it comes to actual legislation. They're famous for viral moments, but can't point to a single real accomplishment." Bongino looked straight into the camera. "Maxine Waters is gone now. Voted out," he declared. "And you know what? The people who voted her out weren't Republicans. They were Democrats, progressives, black voters from her own community who finally just said, enough. That, to me, gives hope. It means accountability is still absolutely possible. It shows that people still care about things like corruption, ethics, and whether their elected officials are truly working for them or just for themselves." Then a caller asked, "Dan, did the FBI ever pressure you to go after Waters?" Bongino just laughed. "Are you kidding me? Half the FBI leadership was already annoyed with me. They thought I was too aggressive, too political. But here's the real story. She went after the FBI first. She questioned our integrity right there on national television. She even accused us of targeting black communities, all without any proof." His smile quickly faded. "You want to attack the FBI? Fine. But you better make sure your own hands are clean. And hers definitely weren't. So I made sure everyone saw just how dirty her hands really were. He took a slow sip of his coffee. I grew up in Queens. My neighborhood, my friends, we didn't have much. We all knew politicians were crooked, but we felt like there was nothing we could do. They were protected. They were connected. They seemed untouchable. He gently set his coffee cup down. But then I became a cop, then a Fed, and eventually a senior official. And I learned something really important. Nobody is truly untouchable if you've got the evidence. Nobody's protected if you've got the documents. The only thing politicians truly fear is when their corruption gets exposed to the light. He leaned back in his chair. So I shined that light on Maxine Waters, and her constituents saw the truth, and they voted her out. That's exactly how the system is supposed to work. Another caller chimed in. What about all those racism accusations? Bongino's expression hardened a bit. Look, I'm not going to pretend racism doesn't exist. It absolutely does. I've seen it firsthand, and I've fought against it. But you know what else is also very real? Corruption. And when someone is corrupt, pointing out that corruption isn't being racist. It's just necessary. He jabbed his finger right at the camera. Maxine Waters wants you to believe that any criticism directed at her is automatically racist. That asking about her sketchy bank deals is racist. That questioning her daughter's million-dollar paychecks is racist. That even mentioning her mansion is racist. He shook his head slowly. But let me tell you something important. Her constituents, mostly black, mostly working-class people, they saw right through that. They understood that living in a $3 million mansion while claiming to represent poor people isn't about race. It's about class. It's about integrity. He leaned forward intently. Waters played the race card because, honestly, it was all she had left. She couldn't defend the facts. She couldn't explain away the evidence. So she tried to make it all about race, but her own community just rejected that argument. And that's the real story. Just 6 months after losing her primary, Maxine Waters announced she was retiring from public life. No more political campaigns, no more media appearances, no more committees or hearings for her. She issued a brief statement. After 35 years of service, I'm stepping away to focus on my family and personal priorities, it read. I am proud of the work I've done and the communities I've served. No mention of the scandal, of course. No mention of the debate. No mention of her loss. She retreated to her Hancock Park mansion and was hardly ever seen in public again after that. A year after the debate, Sidney Clegger had successfully passed 3 new bills into law. One bill provided funding for vocational training in underserved communities. Another simplified small business permits in economically struggling areas. The third created a matching grant program for developing affordable housing. None of these bills made national headlines. None of them went viral. None generated millions of Twitter impressions. But in CA 43, people definitely noticed. At Clegger's one-year town hall, her 12th since taking office, a woman came up to her. My son actually got into that vocational program you helped fund, she said. He's training to be an electrician. He's finally got a real shot at a good career. Thank you so much. Clegger just smiled. That's exactly what we're here for, she said. As she left the town hall that evening, a reporter asked if she'd seen Waters' recent statement, where she complained about political persecution. Clegger simply shrugged. I honestly don't spend much time thinking about my predecessor, she replied. I'm just too busy doing my job. She got into her car, a used Toyota Camry, not some fancy luxury vehicle, and drove to her apartment, a humble one-bedroom place in the district where her constituents could easily spot her at the grocery store, the gas station, or the community center, exactly where a representative truly belongs. And meanwhile, in a Florida studio, Dan Bongino was wrapping up yet another podcast. "You know what the whole Maxine Waters situation really taught me?" he mused. "It taught me that people are absolutely starving for accountability," he explained. "They're sick and tired of corrupt politicians getting away with everything. They're tired of being told that just asking questions is racist or sexist or whatever other ist you want to throw out there." He looked directly into the camera. "You know, in both political parties, there are politicians who've been manipulating the system for years, stacking their own pockets, boosting their family's wealth, and living lavishly, while the people they represent are struggling. And they've gotten away with it because no one's been asking the tough questions, no one's pushed back, and no one's demanded real answers." He smiled. "But that's all starting to change now, thanks to people like Sidney Cam Logger. It's because of voters who simply won't tolerate corruption, even if it's dressed up with the right political party label. And it's thanks to citizens who prioritize actual results over empty political talk." He stood up. "Maxine Waters is out. But believe me, there are hundreds more just like her in Congress, in state legislatures, in city councils. They're everywhere you look." He pointed directly at the camera. "And we're going to find every single one of them. We're going to expose them for exactly who they are. We're going to hold them fully accountable for their actions, not because of their race, their gender, or even their political party, but purely because they're corrupt. And corruption, plain and simple, needs to be called out, no matter who's behind it." He paused. Some people, well, they did something, and that something was corruption, and someone absolutely had to speak up about it. He grinned. "And it might as well be the kid from Queens who does it."